Hello friends, if you're new here, welcome in. If you're returning, welcome back. I'm Hannah, and in today's video we are going to talk about the books that I read in April. This was a very slow reading month for me. I only got through about 5 titles, and a couple of them were on the longer side, but this just was not my best reading month of the year. So we're just gonna keep it at that, and let's just dive straight into the books. First thing that I finished in April was My Husband by Ventura. This is translated from the French by Emma Ramadan. And this book had been on my radar. I think this did its rounds on social media like maybe a year or two back. And in this you are following a unnamed woman who, she's 40, she has a husband and kids, and she's living this very perfect idyllic life, but she is not just in love with her husband, she is obsessed with her husband to the point of compulsion. She decides everything about what she's going to do with her life based around what her husband's reaction is going to be. She dresses a certain way, she acts a certain way, she doesn't go to the bathroom on the same floor as him or when he's around because she wants to have this mystique that she's such a perfect woman, she doesn't use the bathroom. Playing into that weird stereotype, I don't know. But she is also has these compulsions in other ways. She associates certain colors with certain days. She has these very rigid habits that she follows. And she quickly has this all unwound when her husband wakes up one morning and says, "We need to talk." And then you are sent back in time to recount the last 6 days or so leading up to this moment. The prose in this is very smart, and it is a very compelling kind of psychological suspense story. I found the narrator to have a very interesting voice that I was so fascinated by this kind of obsession she had with her husband and her marriage, and the things that she did because of that obsession. The ending of this is, I wouldn't necessarily say a twist, but the ending of this book did hit quite impactfully, I would say. I kind of saw it coming, but the way that it was executed I thought was really well done. This is one of those books that follows like women who are just kind of upset at the world in their lives that they chose, you know, like she doesn't seem to really like motherhood. She just is kind of upset with herself that she had children, but also feels that that's what she should have done. And yeah, it's just, I found this to be really interesting. I read this in like a couple sittings. It was just one of those books where I just kept turning the page and turning the page. But the writing was very smart, and I'd be very interested to read something else by this author in the future. The second book I finished in April was a little bit of a different genre than My Husband. I really wanted to pick up something that was a little fun. I also needed to read a book for a reading challenge I'm doing this year that has a prompt associated with every month, but this month's prompt I had to read a book with an ordinal number in the title, so this one fit the bill, and that was First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. I read Good Spirits by B.K. Borison over the holidays. I thought it was a really cute, fun holiday romance. I got the cheesiness I expected out of it, and I had a good time, and I had a lot of friends who have read this and really raved about this. There's 2 books out in this series now, and they've raved about this series, so I figured I would give it a try. This whole series is based on Nora Ephron movies. This one is Sleepless in Seattle. And in this, you are following our 2 main characters. Aiden is our male main character. He is the host of a radio show in Baltimore, a late night show called Heartstrings, which is all about love and romance. It's a lot of people calling in, and it's supposed to be, you know, talking about relationships and connection and all that stuff. But Aiden has become a little disillusioned with it because a lot of the callers that he gets, it's just very much complaining and misery, and he's kind of fallen out of love with this show that he's been hosting for a couple of years now, and was a very rousing success at a time. And then one night, a young girl, probably like, I think she's 10 or 12, calls in asking for advice for her mother. And her mother ends up getting on the phone, and that is our female main character, Lucy. And you have these 2 characters forming this kind of connection over the phone, and it kind of develops over the course of the book. I really genuinely enjoyed this. I thought both of these main characters were a lot of fun. The circumstances around this are really silly, but I think that's what makes it compelling. I had a lot of fun with it. I think Aiden was a very interesting male main character. He's got a couple of red flags that I do feel like was wrapped up a little too succinctly over the course of the book. Same with Lucy. They're both, it did feel a little tied up too perfectly, but I also recognize that I think that's just kind of what B.K. Borison does with her writing, and it didn't take away from my enjoyment of the book in the end. I did think this is a little on the long side. It probably could have been shaved down just a little bit. I feel like we had to, spend a couple of, it felt like we were kind of repeating things a little bit here and there, but I really enjoyed the journey so much that I just couldn't stop. And I actually ended up giving this 5 stars. So this was another 5-star read for me. If you watched my previous video, I have already picked up the sequel for this, and I believe the 3rd book is confirmed, but I don't know if we have a release date yet. I just also really love this cover design, the kind of 2-color background that they use in here. I just think this is a really well done book, and I just really enjoyed my time with this. It was what I needed, I think, in the moment at the time I was reading it, and I'm really glad that I picked it up. The 3rd book that I'm going to talk about and I finished was a book that took me quite a long time to read because it is deceptively long. This is a book that I picked up when I was in London last year at a bookshop. I really wanted to get a Persephone Books edition of a book while I was over there. We weren't able to make it to their official storefront in Bath when I visited Bath because it was closed for a bank holiday, which was just unfortunate timing for us. But I did manage to find this at another bookshop in London, and that is Mariana by Monica Dickens. Monica Dickens was an author that was around in the 30s and 40s. She wrote after that as well. She is the great-granddaughter of Charles Dickens, so writing obviously runs in the family. This, I think, is one of her more well-known books. She also wrote quite a few nonfiction, I believe. But this is I would call a slice of life novel that is basically documenting a young woman growing up at a certain time in a certain place under certain circumstances. It is not the type of book that I think everybody is going to enjoy, but I really enjoyed my time with it. Our main character is Mary, and when we first meet Mary, she is actually an adult. She is living in this cottage. It is World War II, and there is a storm outside, and she is alone with her dog. She turns on the radio, and she hears a news broadcast that a ship has hit a mine and sunk, and some of these sailors and officers on board have died. And it turns out this ship is the ship that her husband is on. She hears on this radio broadcast that the next of kin have already been notified of people who died, and Mary's phone line is out at the cottage, so she is unable to get any calls. So she doesn't know if her husband is dead or alive, and because of the storm, she can't go into town to try and connect to a call there. She has to wait until morning when the storm passes. So then Mary goes to bed, and then it's her thinking about all of these things that led to her being to this point in her life, and you jump back in time to when she's about 9-ish and going to her grandparents' house in the country, and all of the things that she did while she was out there. This is a very humorous book, and a book that I would not say Mary is a super likable protagonist, but she is, I think, the embodiment of what a young girl growing up can be. She has this kind of tendency to think very self-centeredly, especially in regards to her mother. But she's very caring and has this deep love for romance and these big desires and dreams to have this kind of romanticized life and to find her, find this big romance that she wants to engage in. And I just really enjoyed kind of reading about that. There is no big overarching plot besides you really trying to figure out who her husband is, who of all these men that she meets, who is the husband. And I found the writing itself to be really engaging. It's very, it's got a slight bit of humor to it, a little bit dry at times, but just the way that you kind of move through these different scenes in this young woman's life as she's growing up, I found to be really interesting. And by the time you get to the end of the book, I was just really enjoying the way I just felt like I was sinking back into this time she was alive and just living in the moment with her. I really, really liked the ending of this. I was a little hesitant. I was afraid of where this was going, but the ending, I think, is just really well done. It has, I think it would say it's a pretty happy ending overall, and I just loved how it all just kind of came together in the end. I will say there are some things about this book that don't age particularly well. There are some metaphors and references to things that I was a little bit like, ooh, yeah, this was written at a different time. And I certainly, wasn't comfortable with all of that. But I do feel like overall this is a really interesting read. And if you are the type of person who really likes a slice of life story, just a story about a woman's life and growing up, I think you will really enjoy this one. The next book that I want to talk about is one that I picked up randomly. I actually got this in a book swap in April, and I decided to just read it right away because it was so short and I knew a lot of people were talking about it. I had other friends reading it. That is Orbital by Samantha Harvey. This not only won the Booker Prize in 2024, but I feel like it was a lot of best books of the year list and all sorts of things like that. I remember a lot of people were talking about it. A lot of book clubs did it, all of that. In this, you are following 6 astronauts who are in space on a mission. They are circling the Earth, and you are following basically like 24 hours with them, but it is divided into the orbits that they are going around Earth, because the way that the spaceship moves around the Earth is different from the way that time is moving on Earth. They like are seeing multiple sunrises and sunset over the course of the day. So it is a very kind of, I don't want to say abstract look, but you are kind of getting just little brief snippets into each of these characters' lives and how it kind of brought them here. A lot of observations, a lot of comparisons to what's going on down on Earth. It's very much, I would argue, a love story to space and space travel and kind of the wonder of the world and of space and our connection to it. I don't know that this was my favorite read of the year. I would say the writing is phenomenal. I completely understand why this book is as lauded as it is, but I did find it a little hard to just like sink my teeth into it. I just kind of felt like I was floating in space for a lot of this. I just didn't know that I felt like a deep connection to any of the characters because we just kind of drift around so much from character to character. There were some really key moments that stood out to me. There's at one point talking about a man who lives on this very deserted island that one of the astronauts had met, and there is a typhoon that's going to hit that the astronauts are kind of tracking in space, and the way that I felt a really deep connection to like that whole journey and talking about the people that are going to be affected by this typhoon. So there were a lot of things that I really liked about it. Again, I think Samantha Harvey is a very talented writer. There are moments of prose in here that I just will be thinking about time and time again. But overall, I feel like it is very much the type of book that I think you really need to be able to sit with and you really need to focus on, and you really need to have an open mind while you're reading it, I think, in order to get the most out of this story. Last but not least, the final book I read was the book that took up a lot of my month. It was this and Mariana that basically took up my entire month of April, and I'm not really sure why, because I did really enjoy both of those books. This one, though, is more of a heavy fantasy. It is the first book in a series, like a universe that I have been really wanting to try, and I'm so glad that I'm finally diving into it. I definitely want to read more from this world, but this book is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Farseer trilogy, which is, I think, the first trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings world that Robin Hobb has built. In this, you are following Fitz Chivalry. He is a young boy at the start of the book he is the bastard son of the prince of the kingdom, and his mother was like a maid, just kind of a random person in a village, and he has been brought to the castle, the keep where the prince lives, and the guardians of the prince have basically been told, this is your problem now. This kid, I'm not taking care of him anymore. It's the boy's grandfather that comes and brings this boy and is like, I'm done with dealing with this kid. He's your responsibility. And it sets off this chain of events that leads to the prince abdicating from the throne and going into retire into the countryside. This prince who is very well respected and was the heir to the throne. Lots of these he had a big role to play in the kingdom, and he vanishes from life. But you have Fitz, who then is kind of adopted by the prince's like man, his like kind of his assistant, his right hand, the one who took care of his animals and his horses and always traveled with him and all that. And Fitz has to then learn how to fit in this city that they're living in, and he also has to live with his kind of legacy. He's not exactly well liked because of the effects that his birth has had on the kingdom and everything going forward. There's a lot of magic in here. There are certain people who are given a gift of what they call skill, and in order for Fitz to be made useful, he is also told that he is going to be trained to be an assassin. And so you're following Fitz as he's kind of growing up. I think by the end of the book, he's about 14 or 15, and you are following him over the course of this and just what he has to endure and what he has to learn. This is a very heavy book. It is a very well done book, and the world is fascinating. I think the magic system is fascinating, and so many of these side characters, oh my gosh. Patience, her name is, one of the characters is named Patience. I think she's fascinating. I hope we see more of her in future books. You have Prince Verity, who becomes the new heir to the throne, and Verity is just such a fascinating character. I really grew to love him over the course of the book, and I cannot wait to read more about him either. There's just so many, I think, interesting things that are set up at the end of this book that I cannot wait to read more about in future stories. I do know that this book is devastating. This trilogy is devastating. From what I understand, the first book is a lot of world setup and intrigue, and everybody's like, oh, this is gonna be so great, I can't wait to read more about this. And then book 2 and 3 devastates you. Don't know if I'm looking forward to that. I feel like I need to be like emotionally prepared for it, but I did really enjoy book 1, and I cannot wait to read more by Robin Hobb, because I completely understand why everybody raves about Robin Hobb's world building and this kind of whole realm of the Elderlings world that she's created, because I am really obsessed with the world, and I can't wait to dive into all the other trilogies that are set within this time period to get to see even more of this like widespread world. So that's it. That's everything that I read in April. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please tell me if you read anything that I have, what you guys are reading this month. Would love to talk about it in the comments. If you enjoyed this, please give a like, and if you want to see more from me, please subscribe. I hope you guys are having a great May, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.